URL confs. So what you've got here are entries in your URL conf or URL config. Basically, this maps a URL, an address, to a particular view. And the way it does that is it uses these regular expressions right here, which all it is pattern matching. It's got some funny looking syntax, but let's go through this first one. So let's look at a URL. So your full URL in your browser would look something like this. Your domain name, and then this path. So what Django's URL parsing stuff does is it actually grabs this part. All right, so it ignores that. So when we talk about URLs, it's just looking about the part after the domain name. Okay, so it takes this string and passes it off to this regular expression pattern matching. All right, so this is the start of the string. This is the end of the string. And there are two symbols in regular expressions that indicate those positions. So anytime you see a caret, that indicates the start. Anytime you see a $, that indicates the end. All right. So when you're doing pattern matching, if you're trying to match for a $, there will be nothing, absolutely nothing after the end of a string.
Oh.
Okay. So let's look at this one. Actually, there. I drew my box in the wrong place, so it doesn't get that first slash.
Okay.
So, starting at the very beginning of whatever URL you've captured, so the stuff in this box, right? It tries to match a URL that says polls with a slash after the end and absolutely nothing after that. All right. So this particular URL would match this pattern, and so that URL would get mapped to this index page, this view. All right. So that function gets executed when you type this URL in your browser.
We're telling it where to point to.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
So the next one's similar. All right. So it's a URL that starts with the word polls slash, and then but there's something else after it, right? In fact, there's just one thing after it. So this pattern right here, all this funny looking syntax. The important piece is this little thing. That \d plus, that is one or more digits, right?
No.
So 0, 1, 2, 3, 58, 6,522.
0 is considered a digit.
Correct. Well, yes.
Yeah.
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 You probably are not going to have just a 0, but you could. Anyways, this pattern matches one or more digits, numbers. All right. And what happens when it matches that? Use a different color. Sorry. This stuff inside the angle brackets here, when it matches a digit, it's going to store that digit in a variable called poll_id. So store the matched digit in poll ID. Yeah, So this is gonna be a variable name, okay? And that's what's happening here. So, and then there's your $sign, so this ends with a slash and then nothing else after. So a URL that will get matched by this pattern looks like this. So again, Django looks at this part. There's your start. There's your end. Right? Okay, the first part of your URL pattern looks for polls, which you've got here. There's a slash, which is in your URL pattern. The next part is that regular expression that matches a digit, which is there. So, forgot the question mark. Whole ID. Right? So that regular expression matches that. And then the final part was, there's a slash, right, which matches that slash. And then the $sign, which indicates the end. So what happens is, this stores the value 42 in a variable called whole ID. All right?
Yes.
Now, so this URL then gets mapped into a view called detail. All right, so that view looks something like this. Time for a new color. Def, detail. All right, it gets two parameters. One is a request, because all views have a request parameter. The second is whole ID, and then you've got your code for that view. But this URL that captured the 42, stored it in poll ID. In that view, it gets passed into the view via this parameter. All right. So somewhere in this, you could do a query that pulls out the poll whose database ID is 42.
Okay.